East Asia Center, Brian Murphy of the center, as well as the Miller Center's Christina Lopez Guittardi Chow and Sophie Rosa, and Kelly Farmer at the embassy in Vietnam. We can't do these events without the enormous hard work of the people who line them up, prepare us, select the panelists, and stage the conversation, and I want to thank all of them. As you'll hear shortly, Ambassador Crittenbrink had served in a number of key positions around the world and in Washington, but not the least important in his globetrotting was the time that he spent in Charlottesville getting a master's degree at UVA, and I found out just before we went on, at the Miller Center as well, where he worked for Ken Thompson, the longest serving director of the center. So wahoo wah. He joins us for a discussion on the current state of US-Vietnam relations and the future prospects for coordination at the outset of this new Biden administration. For many Americans, particularly baby boomers, Vietnam remains a reminder of a failed military strategy that cost thousands of lives. Yet over the past 3 decades, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam has seen some of the most steady, remarkable growth in Southeast Asia in terms of both population and economy. And since the 1990s, the country's relations with the United States has entered a new phase of partnership. Today, Vietnam is one of the most pro-American countries in the region. It's a member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, whose charter promotes regional integration in the political, economic, and security realms based on a European-style community. Alongside the United States, it also belongs to APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, an intergovernmental community that is on both sides of the Pacific and that advocates open trade and cooperation. Another key geopolitical factor is the historically contested border between Vietnam and China. Territorial disputes in the South China Sea are ongoing and have yet to reach diplomatic conclusions, successful diplomatic conclusions. Despite its geographic proximity to China, Vietnam has actually been one of the most successful countries in containing the spread of the current COVID-19 pandemic. Though separated from the United States by the Pacific Ocean, the United States and Vietnam face a number of common challenges that invite even closer ties in the future. Cooperation on more sustainable economic development, as well as joint strategies in dealing with rising powers, particularly China and India, offer great potential in ensuring continued political and economic cooperation for both sides. So, to guide the remainder of our conversation this morning, depending on where you are, we have two real UVA stars. Brantley Womack is the holder of the C.K. Yen Chair at the Miller Center and is a professor of foreign affairs at the University of Virginia. Brantley is an expert on China, and in particular, he has been studying asymmetries in international relations. That is, the interplay between great powers and smaller powers, and the interplay between public authority and popular power in China, as well as policy toward Vietnam. He has published numerous articles in leading political journals and authored various books, including China and Vietnam, The Politics of Asymmetry in 2006. Brantley holds honorary professorship at Jilin University in Changchun and East China Normal University in Shanghai. And in 2011, he received the China Friendship Award for his work with Chinese universities. Joining Brantley tonight is Steve Mull, the Vice Provost for Global Affairs here at the University of Virginia. Steve oversees coordinating international outreach programs and developing global institutional partnerships for the university. Steve himself is one of the most accomplished diplomats in the United States. He came to UVA after an illustrious career in the Foreign Service, culminating in his serving until 2018 as Undersecretary for Political Affairs at the State Department, essentially the number 3 job, with responsibility for managing the day-to-day of regional and bilateral policy issues. He was the coordinator for the Iran nuclear implementation from 2015 to 2017, leading government interagency efforts in the realization of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. President Obama appointed Steve as the U.S. ambassador to Poland, and before that, President Bush 43 sent Steve off to serve as ambassador to Lithuania. He has received the Secretary of State's Distinguished Service Award and 2 Presidential Meritorious Service Awards. A graduate of Georgetown University, Steve was recently also a resident senior fellow at Georgetown's Institute for the Study of Diplomacy. His most recent Miller Center event, we put him to work pretty regularly. His most recent Miller Center event was in January for a forum co-hosted with the Center for American Studies at Fudan University in Shanghai to discuss the U.S.-China relationship during the Biden administration. So it's always really a pleasure and an honor to have Steve on our stage, whether real or virtual. Before we get started, we also want you, the audience members, to join our discussion. You can do so by submitting questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many of those as possible. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over the stage to my Miller Center colleague, Brantley Womack, who will introduce Ambassador Crittenbrink and lead tonight's conversation. Brantley, you have the virtual floor.
Well, I'd better unmute then. Thank you very much for your very kind introductions, Bill, and your introduction to both our panelists and participants today, and also to Vietnam and the situation of U.S.-Vietnam relations, which will be our topic tonight. And it is such a pleasure to have Dan Crittenbrink with us today, because it is, I had the pleasure of visiting him in Hanoi, and we had a great discussion about U.S. relations. This was at the beginning of his term. And to hear his reflections at the end of his term and at the beginning of a new American administration. So questions of continuity and change in American policy toward Vietnam especially, but also more broadly toward Southeast Asia and East Asia. And it's a pleasure to welcome Dan to UVA again, because he's doing something that is probably the fantasy of thousands of UVA students, past and present. There are undoubtedly some UVA students who hope to become president of the United States, but I think there's far more that want to be an ambassador. They represent the United States in a senior position abroad. And Dan shows, yes, it is possible. And yet, when the discussion that we have today, it shows it's possible because it's not easy. It's possible because it is a difficult job demanding not just steadfast policy, but also subtle and nuanced interaction with other countries and an appreciation for their circumstances. And so it's a situation where Dan, you're serving as a model for our current students, and as a reminder to our past students, and as an inspiration to our future students. And I really appreciate you coming for that. And of course, the fact that you are actually in Friday morning shows that you're already ahead of the times for us. And perhaps you could tell us what tomorrow will be like, which would be a nice thing. In any case, you're closer to the future than we are. Now, what we're planning to do is to start with questions that have come up, but both from the audience and also from Steve and myself. And Steve will concentrate on questions dealing with broader issues, and I'll try to be more specific on some aspects of Vietnam and U.S.-Vietnam policy, because I've been studying Vietnam for a long time. So let me turn the floor over to Steve now, and we can get started with the discussion.
Thanks so much, Brantley. It's such a great honor to share the screen with you and Ambassador Crittenbrink and, of course, Bill Antholis. I can tell you, as one of Dan's former colleagues in the State Department, where I worked for 36 years before coming here to UVA in 2018, there is no finer or more accomplished serving American diplomat on East and Southeast Asian affairs than Dan. And I'm sure even greater positions of leadership await him going forward. He's in the middle of what's going to be a spectacular career. Dan is a proven crisis manager and an extraordinary diplomat. While I was working for Secretary Clinton in 2012, I had the chance to witness Dan's talents firsthand while he was serving as Deputy Chief of Mission at our embassy in Beijing during some pretty difficult times. And during those days, he faced two of the most difficult challenges that any embassy can ever confront. In February of that year, police officer Wang Lijun fled into the US consulate in Chengdu to seek protection and remained there for about 30 hours. And then 2 months later, as if that wasn't enough, the blind human rights lawyer Cheng Guocheng showed up at our embassy in Beijing, also seeking refuge, and remained there for many days. Throughout both of these crises, Dan was a rock of good judgment and sound advice in navigating and resolving these sensitive crises. So the lesson is, if you're ever in trouble with the authorities, make your way to Dan's house. Now, Dan is on the verge of wrapping up an extraordinary tour as U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, during which he's continued to develop a rich and growing relationship with a key U.S. partner in Southeast Asia during a period of increasing strategic complexity against the backdrop of an extremely painful and difficult history on both sides of the diplomatic relationship. So Dan, I wonder if we could ask you to lead off by sharing your personal reflections on the state of the relationship between the US and Vietnam after your 3.5 years there. What are you most proud of? How do you explain the popularity that the US has in Vietnam?
Well, Steve, Ambassador Mull, thank you so much for that overly kind and generous introduction. And let me just say a few words of welcome and to express gratitude. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Professor Womack, Brantley, you're right. I am living the dream. To have had the opportunity to study at UVA, where I learned not just so much substantive knowledge, but really developed an intellectual framework that I think has supported and sustained me throughout my life and my career. It was such a vitally important time. And then to be able to draw on those experiences and have a wonderful career in the State Department Foreign Service, I really couldn't be happier. And to Mr. Antholis, Bill, again, thank you so much for hosting tonight's event. My time at UVA, the 2 years in which I got my master's degree, were really formative for me. It was a very special time, an important time in my life. And as a former employee of the Miller Center, I'm grateful to you for many things. And Ambassador Steve Mull, I think as was said earlier, you're one of America's finest diplomats in our entire history. So a pleasure to be here with you tonight as well. I really thought that Bill did an extraordinary job in framing the conversation and the situation in which Vietnam finds itself in the state of US-Vietnam relations. I've been so extraordinarily pleased to come to Vietnam and to discover anew that Vietnam is not a war. Vietnam is an extraordinarily important country, beautiful country with warm and gracious people that has become one of America's most important partners in the world, and certainly in the region. So it's been very gratifying to come here and to be a part of that. I think, as was alluded to earlier, I think for many Americans, when they hear the word Vietnam, we often go back to our tragic past from the war. And I would say that having been here, I have discovered that dealing responsibly with issues of the past remains an important part of this partnership and friendship that we've built. I would argue that it's a foundational element dealing with things like accounting for missing soldiers on both sides, remediating unexploded ordnance mines, bombs, dioxin and Agent Orange and the like. That work has generated tremendous goodwill and trust, I think, between both our countries and our peoples. And on that foundation now, we've built an extraordinarily successful partnership. But just to make clear, Steve, we, despite our tragic past and despite the importance of dealing responsibly with that past, this is a partnership and a friendship that is very much focused on the future. I think that our interests and our vision of the kind of region and world in which we want to live is almost completely aligned. The United States and Vietnam both want to live in a stable, prosperous region where countries obey and follow international law, where large countries do not bully the weak, where countries trade freely and openly, and where we advance our shared values. We're doing tremendous work together, from security and trade to energy and war legacies to health and people-to-people exchange. So I begin most speeches by saying I have the best job in the world. And I hope through tonight's conversation, I can demonstrate why. But thank you again. And I'm so honored to be here. Really look forward to a discussion, and I will answer as many questions as you have.
Thanks, Dan. And I'd just like to follow up. Many people who haven't been ambassadors think it's a life of parties and glamour, and I guess there can be some of that sometimes. But better than I, it's mostly not that. And one of the hardest things I certainly found in my career, that ambassadors routinely have to juggle conflicting roles that can very easily get in the way of each other. For example, in some places, you may have to stand up for Western liberal democratic values in a place that may feel threatened by them, while at the same time, you have to develop a working relationship that's productive with host government leaders to advance our mutual interests, to advance US interests. Or you also have to reconcile what's a very public role with doing work secretly. A key to effective diplomacy is confidence and discretion that can't be very public. So I wonder, how have you walked those kinds of tightropes in Vietnam?
Well, Steve, I think that's exceptionally well said. I guess I'd mention just a few points. What I try to do in striking that balance, hopefully correctly, is I first try to take a step back, take the long-term view, and focus on the broader strategic picture. Why are we in Vietnam? What are we here to achieve? And once we lay out exactly what our strategic objectives are for the next year or the next 3 years, then I think you have you have the proper context within which you can make these decisions. I often tell my team, we need to be strategic, we need to be intentional. And once we know what our priorities and our objectives are, we then need to triage ruthlessly to make sure every day we're working towards those top line objectives and not getting distracted by what may be urgent, but is not necessarily important. So that would be general point number one. Point number two, I guess, building on that, despite the fact that this is now one of our most important and positive friendships and partnerships, there is tension in the relationship, just like every relationship. There are differences between our two countries and our political systems. But I think if we keep that larger perspective in mind, we can deal with those issues effectively. Maybe the clearest example would be to mention the issue of human rights. It remains a central part of American foreign policy. It remains a central part of our engagement with Vietnam. And it's certainly, I would argue, one of the most important sources of tension in the bilateral relationship. We advocate for our values and our beliefs, and we do that because as Americans, I think, promoting our values is really just part of our DNA. But we also do so, I explained to our Vietnamese friends, because we really do want Vietnam to succeed. We say that we're here to support a strong, prosperous, and independent Vietnam because for the United States and the American people, we believe we are stronger, more secure, more prosperous when we have successful, like-minded partners with whom we can cooperate. We think Vietnam will be more successful if it protects the rights of its citizens in certain ways, if it lives up to certain international obligations that it has related to human rights. And yet we also make clear we know these decisions can only be made by Vietnam and the Vietnamese people. I think if we keep that context in mind, then I think we can strike the right balance and not get overly focused on just one issue. Because, you know, as I said at the top, despite the differences that we have over human rights, when we look at other issues on our agenda, from the security relationship, the trading relationship, our people-to-people ties, the important legacy of war work we do, then you see, as I said at the top, our interests are almost completely aligned. So I guess in a nutshell, I would argue, if you can develop the right context, keep that context and the broader strategic picture in mind, then you can try to strike the right balance. But thank you. What an excellent question.
Well said. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Brantley, how about over to you?
Well, I don't know if I can keep up with that quality of question, but let me ask some questions regarding your experiences over the last 3 years. And so, for starters, what are your biggest takeaways? You know, what were you most surprised by when you got there? What have you seen change? I imagine that last year with the COVID thing, which is sort of a general stress test for governance all over the world, it must have been an interesting time to be watching another government sort of next to its shoulder and seeing how they were managing and what they were doing and what they were doing right, how they're doing wrong. And just in general, since Vietnam's a relatively rapidly developing place economically, the changes in 3 years can be impressive. So what are your takeaways from that period that seems, it will seem short, it seems long to you now?
Well, Brantley, thank you for the excellent question. And again, thanks for all that you've done for me. I really did enjoy taking your course on Chinese politics many years ago. I'm glad that we've reestablished our connection over the last few years. And it really was, you're right, it's sort of the bookends of my time as ambassador here. I recall in 2018, you joined me here at my residence, and we chatted about Vietnam over drinks. And now here, presumably towards the end of my tenure, I get to wrap up and reflect. I think the things that have stood out the most to me during my time here is I have been struck by what extraordinarily practical and strategic our Vietnamese partners are. And what by that I mean, I think the Vietnamese are the clearest strategic thinkers I have ever met. And they would probably argue that their circumstances and the tough neighborhood in which they live has disciplined them and forced them to be very clear and precise in their strategic thinking. But I've really been struck that our counterparts, I think Vietnamese counterparts, have a clear vision of what they want to achieve. And I think their main objective is to maintain Vietnam's independence, security, and prosperity. I think they do that through skillfully developing a set of balanced relationships with partners around the world. At the same time, I think I've never met more practical counterparts. We don't talk very much about ideology or differences here. I have grappled with, together with my Vietnamese partners and friends, some incredibly sensitive and difficult issues over the last 3 years. We've solved almost every single one of them because I think our Vietnamese friends, for a variety of reasons, are so practical. They know what their bottom line is. And I think their bottom line is for them, again, maintaining their independence, their security, and their prosperity. And in that context, I think anything is possible. So that's been quite striking. I think secondly, Brantley, I can't help as an American, and especially as the American ambassador, I can't help but reflect on our past painful history. And I think the most striking thing for me over the last 3 years is to find that even those issues, I would argue, are still central and are still foundational elements to our partnership. They're incredibly positive. You know, I had a moment before our talk started to talk with Steve about, I remember the first time I visited Vietnam, I felt somewhat apprehensive as an American, given our past history. And what I've discovered is that we've taken this tragedy and we've turned it into one of the most positive and productive and constructive parts of the relationship. My good friend Ann Mills Griffiths, who's the head of the League of POW MIA Families in the United States, taught me that it was our work well before normalization to account for missing American service members that first brought the United States and Vietnam together, got us talking again, and served as the bridge to normalization. And that work, as I said, on other humanitarian and legacy of war issues continues to be important, and again, builds the trust that allows us to do broader strategic things. But I've been struck at just how positive and warm those interactions are. To see American and Vietnamese veterans get together here and to see the emotion and the warmth between them is truly moving. Some of my most memorable events here were related to reconciliation and trying to overcome that past. I remember I visited the Ham Dong Bridge in Thanh Hoa province, and I held hands with American and Vietnamese veterans as we walked across the bridge that was the site of fierce fighting and American bombing 50 years ago. And now Americans and Vietnamese are holding hands and reflecting on that past. I was the first American ambassador to visit a North Vietnamese martyr cemetery, the Trung Son Martyr Cemetery in Quang Tri province. I've also been honored to visit on multiple occasions the former Republic of Vietnam cemetery at Bien Hoa, or the Binh An Cemetery outside of Ho Chi Minh City. So again, I think it was striking to me how important those historical legacy and reconciliation issues are, but then just how positive they are. And maybe just one final point. When I reflect on my time here, I'm also struck with by just how much we've achieved together in the last 3 years. Even though these historical issues will always be important and emotional and meaningful, we get some serious practical work done in this relationship every day. I'm proud we've signed billions of dollars worth of commercial deals on everything from selling jets to major energy deals, healthcare equipment, and the like. We cooperate closely on a range of security issues related to the South China Sea, North Korea. We support Vietnam's deployment of peacekeepers around the world. Our people-to-people ties are extraordinarily positive. I think the United States of America may be more popular in Vietnam today than any other country in the world. And then you mentioned health as well. Maybe I can just close my answer to this question by focusing. Talk about getting practical work done. I am really proud. Over the last 20 plus years, the United States has been a key partner to Vietnam in building their healthcare and health sector, public health capacity. We've continued to do that through the COVID-19 crisis, and I'm proud of the assistance, both technical and otherwise, that we've provided to Vietnam. But as we often say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And we found we have great friends in Vietnam as well, because the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese people donated millions of medical personal protective equipment, masks, gowns, and all sorts of things. And I'm confident that those donations saved American lives. So again, it's this great, as I reflect, Brantley, I have this great mix of emotions, really thinking about all the moving experiences that I've gone through, especially related to our past, but a great sense of pride of the work we do together that benefits both countries and peoples, makes us both more secure and more prosperous. Thank you for a great question, giving me a chance to reflect.
Good answer. And I really think that the impact that we had the war, it's so nice that all of that, it wasn't simply a question, it was a question of touching, of people from both sides getting to know one another. We questioned from a veteran, Jerome Brown, was an Orange disabled American veteran, disabled Agent Orange, and sympathetic with those disabled in Vietnam. And his question is, are we going to continue? I certainly hope that one of the continuities in our Vietnam will be to continue the good work that you described and the good work that I'm sure that Jerome Brown has been a part of.
Well, Brantley, maybe just one comment, and I'm confident.
Sure.
I'm confident that work will continue. I think it really is a foundational element of what we've done here, and maybe just a brief comment or two on that.
Sure.
The work that we began so long ago to account for American service members continues. We have, since the war, accounted for, I believe it's now 728 missing Americans since the war, and there remain 1,245 American service members that are unaccounted for. But that work is extraordinarily important and meaningful even today to American families, and it only happens because we have such close cooperation and support from the Vietnamese. We've also increased our efforts to help Vietnam account for its own war dead, and I'm confident that our programs related to clearing unexploded ordnance, remediating dioxin or Agent Orange, and treating Vietnamese with disabilities of all causes in certain 8 priority provinces. I'm confident that work will continue going forward. And maybe I can give you just one small tidbit that was very moving to me. When I first visited Guangxi province, which is one of the most heavily contaminated regions in the world, certainly in Vietnam, for landmines and unexploded bombs from the war, I was told that just a decade ago, there were dozens of people every year who were being killed and injured due to unexploded ordnance. In the last 3 years in Guangxi province, there's not been a single injury or a single death. That's the kind of work that really has a practical impact that changes people's lives in a very positive way and helps build trust. Also, just a couple weeks back, I was down at the Bien Hoa Air Base right outside of Ho Chi Minh City, which is the site of a major cleanup operation where we are making a major investment to remediate the dioxin or Agent Orange contamination there. It'll be about a decade-long project, but just last month we celebrated the completion of the first phase. And a final comment on Agent Orange. In 2018, I went to the Da Nang airport and participated in the concluding ceremony for the completion of our work there for cleaning up the dioxin contamination there. So I'm absolutely confident that work will continue. It remains vitally important. Thank you.
That's great. And let me say that a place that is important to us in its economy is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Very few to have positive growth during this last year. And it's looked on with great respect, Southeast Asia and beyond Southeast Asia and East Asia, and has served terms in the Security Council. But tend to think of Vietnam often in terms of a triangle of the United States, Vietnam, and China, and the role. So, set of questions, I think, will deal with their relationship, which, since you speak Chinese and you served it, to answer. And I'll start with, and not you, from the audience. About state of international affairs. It's not driven solely by ideological differences. What lessons, if any, from the normalization and management of U.S.-Vietnam relations over the past several decades could be drawn to guide our U.S.-China relations? Usually in Vietnam, you hear about learning from China. Here we have a question of Vietnam can affect our
Brantley, I seem to have lost your sound, and I don't know if it's just me or for everyone, but I apologize.
Positive experience.
I caught enough. I think I caught enough of the question that I'll try to answer it. I think I heard 2 questions. One was related to our economic and trade relationship, and the other was related to China, the triangle as you described it, and also the role of ideology. So if I understood that correctly, let me try to address that briefly. I would say in terms of our economic and trade relationship with Vietnam, it's certainly one of the most important aspects of the relationship. Vietnam represents for the United States one of our fastest growing export markets in the world. In particular, it's a top 10 agricultural export market, sixth largest in the world for us, but it is also important in many other sectors beyond agricultural, including aviation, healthcare, IT, and increasingly even defense. So, you mentioned Vietnam has been one of the world's fastest growing economies for the last 2 decades, and some of our friends at the World Bank have projected it could be the world's fastest growing economy over the coming 2 decades. So tremendous opportunities in Vietnam that I think are really important for American workers and manufacturers. We'll continue to exploit those, especially in the areas that I mentioned. There are a number of, candidly speaking, market access challenges that we address aggressively as well. And we'll continue to fight very aggressively on behalf of, again, American workers and companies and exporters. I think, Brantley, you're an expert on China and Vietnam. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on either, but I've spent a lot of my career in this part of the world. And I think it's safe to say, as my Vietnamese friends have said on the day I arrived, they said China looms large over everything here. And I think that's probably true for many in the region. I think, as I mentioned at the top, I'm very gratified and hopeful because when you look at what our broader strategic interests are with Vietnam and with our other partners in ASEAN, I think we're almost completely aligned. We want to see a stable, secure, prosperous region. We want to see a region where all countries, big and small, play by the rules. We want to see a region where large countries do not bully the small. And I think, as Secretary Blinken outlined yesterday in his great speech, his first major foreign policy speech, China is the most significant challenge that I think the United States and the world faces today. It's incumbent upon all of us to grapple with that challenge in the most straightforward way possible. And I think, as the Secretary outlined, the frame for the U.S.-China relationship will be competition. And we will be competitive with China in areas where we need to be. We will be adversarial in certain areas as well where we're required. And yet we're hopeful that there will be certain areas in which we may be able to cooperate with China as well. But I think those are the issues that all of us in the world are grappling with today, certainly our partners in Vietnam and in ASEAN. Final point on ideology. It's not just maybe my realist inclination, thanks to my education at the University of Virginia. I think it's been my practical experience as a diplomat as well. And it's been particularly advanced here in Vietnam in the last 3 years. I do not think that ideology is the prime determinant for a country's actions. Ideology is important, and I'm not dismissing it completely. I would just simply say that if you look at our relationships around the world, including with Vietnam, ideology is not the central and most important driving force in this relationship. It's our national interests, our respective national interests, and how countries choose to advance them. And I would argue that is largely the case in China as well. That's a subject we can debate, but having lived in Beijing for a long time and grappled with those issues as well, I think I would still have the same general position there. It's a country's national interests and, more importantly, their behavior and their actions and how they choose to define and then advance those interests that's most important. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Dan. I'd like to go to the floor now and put on a voice from your past. Your former advisor, Professor Len Schopa, is with us here tonight in Charlottesville. And so, Len, I'd like you to call on you to unmute and ask your question.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Is that correct?
We hear you.
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Dan, great to interact with you over this video device at least, and look
Thank you
forward to
so
seeing
much.
you back in the United States or in Asia one of these days. I'm glad that you started to lay out some of what you've observed about Vietnamese strategic thinking and how they're starting to think about how they have been thinking about China. It must have been particularly interesting for you over the last 3 years to engage more deeply with your Vietnamese counterparts and learn what exactly worries them about possible future Chinese behavior. And among the things that they might be worried about would be a military threat, especially at sea, but perhaps even on land. They were, I think, the Vietnamese are the last country to be invaded by China. So that must still be on their mind. But in addition, they are very dependent, very asymmetrically dependent on the Chinese market, and their economy, their economic success depends very much on maintaining good relations with China. So I was wondering which you perceive to be the greater of the two concerns on the part of the Vietnamese. Are they more worried about the military threat or the Chinese possible use of economic leverage to control Vietnam? And maybe one test of that would be, there are two things that the United States could do to help Vietnam with its perceived anxieties. One would be to rejoin the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP, which we negotiated with the Vietnamese and then abandoned. So that would be a way to reduce their economic dependence on China, and might be valuable to them. Another would be to further develop our military relationship with the Vietnamese, possibly to the point of some sort of alliance. So which would the Vietnamese value more, that deeper economic relationship or the deeper military relationship?
Well, Len, Professor Sciappa, thank you so much. What an honor to hear from you this evening. And let me just give a special shout out to you. I think, as was indicated earlier, Len was my advisor and my thesis advisor when I was at UVA, spent a lot of time with me. I learned most of what I know about Japan and Asia from Len. You also gave me a great, as I said earlier, intellectual framework with which to study and examine the region. And as you recall from the painful process of giving me feedback on my thesis, you even improved my writing skills. So very grateful to you. And most recently, I'm very grateful to you and your lovely wife for attending my swearing-in ceremony in 2017, which was especially meaningful to me. So thank you for everything, and great to see or hear from you again. I think your question is an outstanding one. Maybe just a few general reflections. I mentioned a little bit earlier on one of my very first days, I met with one of my most important counterparts, and that was his first opening line to me. Welcome to Vietnam. We're delighted you're here. China looms large over everything. Glad you have a background on China. Look forward to working with you as we grapple with these issues. I think, Len, what I would say is, first, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Vietnamese. I'm here to represent the United States and American interests. But when I try to analyze Vietnamese behavior, or when I reflect on all the conversations I've had with Vietnamese friends, both in and out of the government, I think the Vietnamese have millennia worth of experience of dealing with their big northern neighbor. I think that experience has taught them to be very strategic and practical, very realistic about the long-term challenge and the opportunities that come with living next door to China. I once had a debate with a Vietnamese counterpart here, whether the focus of Vietnamese foreign policy and strategic thinking is balance or independence. And the way he said it was, it's independence, that's our goal. And we ensure our independence by pursuing balance. And what that means is a balanced series of security relationships, a balanced series of economic and other relationships as well. Many people in the region and around the world are always worried that somehow the United States of America is trying to compel countries to choose between the United States and China. And I just want to assure you and all of our listeners tonight, we're not asking anybody to choose. We're not forcing anybody to choose. I can guarantee you that's not what the United States does. We want to work, though, to ensure that all countries have a choice and have the primary say in their country's interests and actions and in guaranteeing their sovereignty. When it comes to China specifically, I think I'll leave to the Vietnamese to describe exactly how they pursue that balance with the Chinese. But from our perspective, what we've tried to do in the security relationship, our security relationship is growing by leaps and bounds. One key element is the work that we do to try to build Vietnam's security capacity, especially its maritime capacity. We believe that the region is more secure and prosperous, and the threshold to conflict is higher if all countries in the region, and we do this not just with Vietnam, but with the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and others, if all countries have the ability to understand what's happening, for example, in their maritime domain, and have the ability to protect their interests, that's something that we think contributes to stability in the region from which we all benefit. And if you look at some other areas where our security relationship has grown, as I mentioned, we were proud to support the deployment of Vietnam's first peacekeepers to South Sudan. We've had 2 American aircraft carriers visit Vietnam in the 3 years that I've been here, the first ships to do so, the first aircraft carriers to do so since the war. We've had an intense series of dialogue between our 2 militaries and military leaders. The U.S. Secretaries of Defense have been here 3 times. So I think our security relationship is growing exponentially. I would just say, though, if my focus is the bilateral relationship, but if you look at what Vietnam is doing, it's developing its security ties with countries all around the world, with India, with Australia, with Japan, with many other countries. And similarly on the economic and trade side, for Vietnam, the United States is its largest export market. And yet China is its largest trading partner. So it is an important relationship for Vietnam. I often joke with my Vietnamese friends that just like the United States, Vietnam has a very complex but important relationship with China that it tries to manage. Now, unfortunately, I think we've seen in recent years, and we can see it happening right now, China often uses all levers and all elements of its national power to try to coerce countries into doing what China wants. And that threat is very real for Vietnam as well. And I would argue it's probably one of the reasons why Vietnam has concluded a series of trade agreements and free trade agreements with partners all around the world, with ASEAN, with Australia, with Japan, with Europe, and others. Lynn, I can't remember. I think you did ask the TPP question, and I think it's come up earlier tonight as well, and I neglected to answer it earlier. Let me try to take it on squarely here. I don't have anything to say, and I'm not going to get in the prediction game of what the United States may or may not do regarding its trade agreements going forward. I do know that President Biden and his team have made clear that the focus of America's trade policies will be American workers and the American middle class, protecting and advancing their interests. So setting aside the issue of TPP, what I say to my Vietnamese friends is U.S.-Vietnam economic and trade relationship will remain central to everything that we do. We're going to continue to advocate aggressively for our interests, and again, the interests of American workers and exporters. And we're going to do that in a way that I would argue is going to benefit both countries and peoples in very clear ways. So I guess your question was, what would Vietnam benefit from most? I think my answer is all of the above. And that's what we hope we offer as one of Vietnam's key partners. Is we are a key economic and trade partner. We are key security partners. But again, without speaking for the Vietnamese, I think if you look at their if their policies, they're aggressively courting partners all over the world in the name of balance, so as to secure their independence. I hope that answers your question. So wonderful to see you again. Thanks again for all that you've done for me.
Very good.
Ambassador, I'd like to turn to public diplomacy for a moment. So when you were listing your various accomplishments from your time there over the past 3 years, all of your fans here online were a little disappointed you didn't mention the now famous rap video. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to do that, what you were hoping to achieve with it, and how you rate it? How did it work as a public diplomacy initiative?
Well, I might leave the rating to you and your viewers, but thank you for that question. I should say at the outset, I seem to recall several years ago that you were famous for something similar. I think you did something singing some Christmas carols when you were in Poland, which made a big splash as well. So I think you probably know what we were trying to do, but let me try to explain a little bit. We spend so much time on what we call public diplomacy, right? Our work to try to explain to the Vietnamese public who we are as Americans, what we believe in, what we stand for, and try to build support for the United States and for the U.S.-Vietnam partnership. And we do that in so many ways. We have a really active social media outreach campaign. I do media and TV interviews, newspaper interviews all the time. We bring in outside speakers. We bring in performers, artists, lecturers, again, all designed to try to explain to the Vietnamese people who we are as Americans, and hopefully convince them, of the positive attributes of being a partner of the United States. So that was the broader context. This specific video, every year at Tet is, of course, the Lunar New Year holiday in Vietnam, the most important holiday by far for Vietnamese friends, when they get together with friends and families and reflect on the year and really celebrate their blessings. I always try to do something around Tet to demonstrate respect for Vietnam and Vietnamese culture. And I've done things like, I learned how to make this rice cake called Bang Choom one year. I sang a song with a Vietnamese pop star. I went out and learned how they graft these wonderful peach blossoms that are so symbolically meaningful. All of that was fine. This year, I want to give a shout out to our public affairs officer in Ho Chi Minh City, Matt Ferentz. He came to me and he said, look, let's do something a little more exciting and a little different this year. He said, rap and hip hop in Vietnam are incredibly popular, increasingly popular among Vietnamese young people. Let's do something that will interest them. And let's do something that promotes this new avenue of exchange and collaboration between Americans and Vietnamese, namely hip hop. So he came up with the idea that I would do a rap video that he wrote that celebrated the Tet holiday in Vietnam and celebrated the U.S.-Vietnam relationship. So we went out and did it. We shot here in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. It was a lot of fun to do. I got together with one of Vietnam's big rap stars, Wowie, who of course was inspired by American rap artists like Jay-Z and learned his English from American rap. We spent a day together, absolutely loved it. And it played really well here in Vietnam, just as we hoped it would. It even exceeded expectations. Millions of views, tens of thousands of, hundreds of thousands of likes, tens of thousands of positive comments, and really played well in Vietnam like we hoped it would. I think the thing that shocked me the most is, and I still don't know if I understand it, was that so many people outside of Vietnam noticed it and commented on it. So it's been a surprise. It was a lot of fun to do. I'd like to think that it did build more goodwill and positive feelings towards the United States, and that can only help our relationship. And for all the people around the world who for some reason paid attention to it, maybe it highlighted to them today that in Vietnam we have a partnership and friendship with this great country. That's what I hope. Some people have commented on my lack of rhythm, and I will just say guilty as charged. But we really did it in a way, again, to show some respect to our Vietnamese friends, and also to celebrate, I think, a wonderful part of American culture. As an American diplomat, while the attractiveness and the beauty of American culture and all its diversity is really one of our most positive and powerful attributes. And I'm excited that since we did this video, there was a lot of commentary in the Vietnamese media about my rap video, but after that, the commentary on my rap video stopped. But there's been a lot of commentary on the importance of rap and the importance of hip hop in Vietnam and explaining to the Vietnamese public what it means. We're talking about now, we feel like we've started something great here. We wanna do some exchanges between American hip hop artists and Vietnamese rappers. I think this could be a beautiful thing. We're really excited about it. It's been a bit of a surprise, but I think it turned out quite well. But thanks.
Yeah, congratulations. What a home run. A perfect public diplomacy initiative. Really great work. Brantley, over to you again.
Okay, just we're running it low on time, but I just wanted to ask, second to your rap video, what would you say is your most successful accomplishment during your time in Vietnam? Well, let's say bracket the rap video, you know, maybe it's not the first.
No, that's a great question. I don't know if I could narrow it down to one thing, but I'll maybe give you maybe two or three. I guess the first would be, as I mentioned earlier, it's been so emotionally gratifying and meaning to me to feel that as an American, I was part of helping to promote reconciliation, dealing with these humanitarian and legacy of war issues in a way that helped our two countries, again, continue to heal and grow closer to one another. You know, my walk across the Ham Zone Bridge hand in hand with American Vietnamese veterans, going to the Chung Son Martyrs Cemetery, going to the Bien Hoa Cemetery, all of those, I think events have been really meaningful to me, and I think they have helped contribute to reconciliation. So I am really proud of that. Secondly, I'm also proud of the practical things that we've gotten done. You know, the billions of dollars in commercial deals that we signed, because again, this is a real relationship. We're here to get real business done that benefits both countries. I'm really proud of that. Proud of the 2 aircraft carrier visits. I'm proud as well of something really significant. Last year during our 25th anniversary year, we signed an agreement to bring Peace Corps volunteers to Vietnam for the first time. First volunteers will arrive next year in 2022. I think that's extraordinary. We've done some other practical things, like we concluded an agreement to build a new American embassy in Hanoi that I think will be befitting of this new partnership. And, you know, we've done some very practical things too. We've helped some American citizens, gotten them released from prison and returned to the United States, helped some Vietnamese activists as well. So I'm proud of some really practical things. And maybe thirdly and finally, I'm really proud to have been associated with this team that I work with in Vietnam. You get a lot of attention as an ambassador, but you know, whether it's the rap video or anything else that we've achieved here, we've done it together as a team. My entire team, Vietnamese and American employees alike, consists of approximately 1,000 employees. I'm really proud of them and what we've achieved together. I'm also proud that we've tried to take good care of them. There have been no COVID-19 cases in our mission. I think people have done good work, and they've done it in a safe and healthy way. So those are a few thoughts. Thank you so much for the question, Brantley.
Thank you for doing so many good things in Vietnam. And Steve, do you have any concluding remarks?
No, just to echo what you just said, Brantley. Dan, you do such a great job representing all of us there. It's such a critical, important relationship. And, you know, history is made by having the right person in the right place at the right time. And you check all of those boxes. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. We wish you nothing but success in what we know will be a stellar onward career. And we can't wait to get you here in person, in the flesh, to continue the conversation.
Well, Steve, thank you. And again, thank you to you and to Brantley and to Bill and to Len and all my friends and mentors at the University of Virginia. What an honor it's been to come back and spend some time with all of you virtually. And I really do look forward to the day when I can get back to the States and we can do something like this in person. It's been a tremendous honor to spend time with you. I do think I have the best job in the world here in Vietnam, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to explain why. And let me just again reiterate my gratitude to the University of Virginia, again, to all my professors and mentors there. Thank you for what you've taught me. Thanks for your support and your assistance. And thanks again for spending time with me tonight.
Thanks again. Thanks to all our visitors, Brantley.
And thanks to all the audience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really
All right.
appreciate it. Hope to see you all
Okay.
again soon.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.